Fire consumed my lungs in my last life, while my own sister smiled watching me burn. I swore if I ever opened my eyes again, I'd rewrite our destinies. Waking up on the day of our genetic inheritance ceremony, I knew exactly what to do. Take my crown, Izzy. See if it doesn't kill you. Gasps of air tore through my throat as I shot up from the mattress, my hands instinctively clawing at my own chest. There was no fire. There was no searing pain of the extraction drill piercing my sternum. Instead, I felt the cool, high-thread count Egyptian cotton sheets beneath my damp palms, and smelled the distinct, sickeningly sweet scent of my sister's Chanel No. 5 lingering in the hallway. I was alive. I wasn't ash scattered across the ruins of the Hastings biotech compound. I threw off the covers and stumbled toward the floor-to-ceiling mirror in my bedroom. Staring back at me was a 19-year-old Clara Hastings, unscarred, unburnt, and unbroken. I checked my phone on the mahogany nightstand. The screen read, May 18th, 2026. My breath hitched. It was the exact day of the awakening. In our world, the upper echelons of society didn't just inherit trusts and offshore accounts. We inherited genetic anomalies engineered and passed down from the primordial days of the Vanguard Genetics Institute. Today was the day my twin sister Izzy and I were to be presented with our family's two ancestral cores. In my previous life, I had fought tooth and nail for the Aurelian genome, the legendary golden bloodline. I won it, proving my compatibility was superior. But my victory was short-lived. Izzy, consumed by jealousy, spent the next 3 years manipulating our father, poisoning my food with heavy metals to destabilize my core, and finally conspiring with my fiancé Leo to strap me to a surgical table at Johns Hopkins Medical Center to extract it from my living body. They left me to burn in the incinerator wing to cover their tracks. But God, or whatever cruel architect manages the universe, had given me a rewind button, and I wasn't about to play the same game twice. I dressed in a simple, understated navy dress, a stark contrast to the aggressive crimson I had worn in my past life, and walked downstairs. The Hastings estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was already bustling with private security and executives from Pfizer and Moderna, all eager to see which twin would inherit the family's crown jewel. In the grand living room, my father, Ryder Hastings, was swirling a glass of Macallan 18, chatting amiably with Dr. Mercer, the chief geneticist from the Mayo Clinic, who had been flown in to oversee the integration. "Ah, Clara," my father said, his tone carrying that familiar, dismissive chill, "your sister has been waiting." Izzy stood by the marble fireplace, looking radiant in a white silk gown, a Cartier Panthère watch gleaming on her wrist. She gave me a sympathetic, practiced smile, the one she used for the paparazzi. "I was worried you wouldn't come down, Clara. I know how anxious you get about these things." "I'm perfectly fine, Izzy," I said, my voice shockingly steady. I didn't look at Leo, who was standing a few feet away, practically salivating at Izzy's display of wealth and grace. To think I had ever loved that spineless social climber made me nauseous. Dr. Mercer cleared his throat and gestured to the titanium briefcase on the center table. He keyed in the biometric passcode, and the case hissed open, releasing a cloud of liquid nitrogen. Inside lay 2 crystalline vials. The first was the Aurelian genome. It pulsed with a blinding, incandescent gold light, radiating a terrifying amount of kinetic energy. It was raw power dominance and absolute biological supremacy. The golden bloodline. The second vial contained something that looked entirely dead. It was a murky, greyish-green sludge with what appeared to be a single shriveled black root suspended in the center. The verdant spore. Behind closed doors, the board of directors jokingly called it the useless weed. It had been passed down for 6 generations, and no one had ever successfully synchronized with it. Those who tried either felt nothing or suffered mild allergic reactions. It was considered a genetic dud, a useless relic of a failed experiment. The rules are simple, as dictated by your grandfather's will. Dr. Mercer announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. The twins may choose their inheritance. Should they desire the same core, a compatibility blood resonance test will determine the rightful owner. In my last life, Izzy had immediately reached for the golden bloodline. I had challenged her, won the resonance test, and sealed my own death warrant. This time, as Izzy's hand hovered over the pulsing gold vial, she cast a sidelong glance at me, her eyes daring me to speak up, daring me to challenge her. She wanted the fight. She wanted to play the victim when I took it from her. I stepped forward. The room went dead silent. My father frowned, setting his scotch down. Leo subtly shifted his weight, ready to intervene if I made a scene. I reached past the golden vial, my fingers hovering over the murky, pathetic little root. "I choose the verdant spore," I said clearly. The silence that followed was deafening. Izzy's hand froze mid-air. Her meticulously crafted mask of sweet innocence slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing sheer unadulterated confusion. "Ah, are you sure, Clara?" Dr. Mercer stammered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "The Aurelian genome is—" "I am aware of what it is, Doctor," I interrupted smoothly. "Izzy has always been the bright, shining star of this family. It's only fitting she takes the golden bloodline. I am perfectly content with the weed. Perhaps I can finally get my garden in order." My father let out a booming laugh, breaking the tension. "Well, I always said you lacked ambition, Clara, but I suppose there's a certain nobility in knowing your place. Very well. Izzy, the Aurelian genome is yours." Izzy snatched the golden vial as if she were terrified. I would change my mind. She gripped it so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Thank you, sister," she whispered, her eyes flashing with a triumph that made me want to laugh out loud. She had no idea. She didn't know the secret I had uncovered in the agonizing months before my death in my previous life. The Aurelian genome wasn't just a power source. It was a highly aggressive, genetically engineered parasite. It granted immense strength, flawless beauty, and accelerated cognition, but it fed on the host's telomeres. It burned through a human lifespan at a terrifying rate. By 25, the host would begin to experience complete cellular degradation. The only thing that could stabilize it, the only thing that could synthesize its radioactive decay, was the unique enzymatic structure produced by the useless weed. The verdant spore wasn't a weed at all. It was the world tree genome. It was the cradle of life, the ultimate regenerative baseline that Vanguard had lost the manual for decades ago. It just took excruciating patience to cultivate. I took the murky green vial, feeling the cold glass against my palm. "Enjoy the crown, Izzy," I thought, suppressing a dark smile. "It's going to melt right through your skull." The 6 months that followed the awakening ceremony were a study in extreme contrasts. Izzy became a modern-day demigod. The Aurelian genome synchronized flawlessly with her DNA, amplifying her physical and mental traits to superhuman levels. She was suddenly gracing the cover of Forbes, hailed as the next step in human evolution. She brokered multi-billion-dollar deals with the Vanguard Group, her cognitive processing speed, allowing her to outmaneuver seasoned Wall Street veterans. She and Leo became New York's most insufferable power couple, constantly photographed, leaving exclusive galas dripping in diamonds and arrogance. As my father essentially exiled me. Disappointed by my pathetic lack of drive, he sent me to the family's neglected summer estate in the Hamptons. My monthly allowance was slashed, and I was effectively erased from the Hastings family's public relations materials. It was exactly what I needed. Cultivating the World Tree genome was not a passive experience. It was brutal. Every night I lay on the dusty wooden floor of the estate's massive, overgrown greenhouse, shivering in pools of my own sweat as the verdant spore tore through my nervous system, rebuilding me from the inside out. It felt like vines of razor wire were threading themselves through my veins. But by the 4th month, the agonizing pain gave way to something miraculous. I was sitting in the garden one morning when I accidentally cut my palm on a rusted pruning shear. Before a drop of blood could even hit the soil, the skin knitted back together, seamless and smooth. No scar, no pain. I began experimenting. I discovered that I could secrete a highly complex biorestorative enzyme from my pores when my heart rate dropped to a meditative state. I harvested it, synthesizing it in a makeshift lab I built in the basement. I tested it on dying plant life, then on a stray dog with advanced necrosis in its leg. The results were instantaneous and godlike. Complete cellular regeneration. Knowing my father and Izzy would steal it if they found out I needed a proxy. I reached out to Nolan Cross, an eccentric, disgraced former researcher from Johns Hopkins, who had been blacklisted by my father 5 years ago for ethical violations that were actually just Nolan refusing to falsify trial data for a Hastings biotech drug. I met Nolan in a dingy diner in Montauk. I slid a vial of the synthesized World Tree enzyme across the sticky table, along with a heavily encrypted flash drive containing my clinical observations. "What is this chlora?" Nolan asked, his eyes bloodshot, eyeing the vial skeptically. "Redemption," I said simply. "I need you to patent this through a blind Delaware LLC. We'll call it Aegis Therapeutics. Start with localized tissue repair trials. The formula is stable, but I need your credentials to get it past the FDA fast tracks without triggering Vanguard's monopoly alarms." He analyzed the data on his laptop right there in the booth. Within 10 minutes, he was weeping softly into his hands. This is impossible. The structural integrity of these proteins. It rewrites damaged DNA without aggressive immune rejection. Where did you get this? "I grew a weed," I replied, while Aegis Therapeutics began quietly accumulating patents and securing immense backing from private independent equity firms in Europe. The cracks in Izzy's golden armor started to show. I saw it first on a live broadcast of a charity gala in late November. Izzy was being interviewed by Anderson Cooper. She looked stunning, but as the camera zoomed in, I caught the micro-tremors in her left hand. When she smiled, there was a faint, almost imperceptible discoloration along her jawline, a webbing of gray veins that she had desperately tried to conceal with heavy foundation. The parasite was getting hungry. The Aurelian genome was running out of external fuel and had begun feeding on her central nervous system. I knew the timeline. First the tremors, then blinding migraines that felt like glass shattering in the brain. Finally, the paranoid delusions and organic failure. In my past life, this was when she realized she needed the weed's stabilizing properties leading to my murder. But this time, I wasn't in her proximity, and I wasn't weak. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter of the Hamptons estate. The caller ID flashed Leo. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, Leo." "Chlora." His voice was tight, strained. The arrogant playboy drawl was completely gone. "We need to talk. It's about Izzy." "Oh, is the Golden Girl doing well? I saw her on CNN yesterday. She looked tired." "She's sick, Chlora." Leo snapped, panic bleeding into his tone. The doctors at Mayo don't know what's happening. Her white blood cell count is plummeting, and her cellular structure is degenerating. Dr. Mercer thinks the Aurelian genome is unstable. That's a tragedy, I said, pouring myself a cup of Earl Grey tea. But what does that have to do with me? I'm just tending to my garden. Mercer found old Vanguard files. Leo blurted out desperation, making him sloppy. He says the only way to synthesize the decay is with a counteragent, the verdant spore. The thing you took. Clara, we need you to come back to Greenwich. Immediately. We need to run some extractions on you to save her. Extractions. The word sent a phantom pain shooting through my chest, echoing the drill from my past life. They still thought they could just summon me and butcher me for parts. They still thought I was the submissive, ambitionless sister. I'm afraid I can't do that. Leo, I said softly, staring out the window at the greenhouse, where vibrant, unearthly flowers were blooming in the dead of winter. I'm expecting some important guests today. Clara, don't be a stubborn bitch. She is your sister. She's going to die if you don't give us the spore. Then I suggest she start making her funeral arrangements. I whispered and hung up the phone. I barely had time to set the phone down when the heavy iron gates of the Hamptons estate groaned open on the security monitors. 3 matte black SUVs with Hastings Biotech logos slapped on the sides rolled up the driveway. They weren't here to ask nicely. Izzy had sent her hounds, but she was about to find out that the weed she discarded had grown into a forest she couldn't possibly burn down. Gravel crunched under the heavy reinforced tires of the 3 matte black Cadillac Escalades as they breached the perimeter of my Hampton sanctuary. I didn't run. I didn't hide. Instead, I poured the rest of my Earl Grey tea into the sink, smoothed out the wrinkles in my linen trousers, and walked out the front door to greet my guests. 6 men stepped out of the vehicles. They weren't standard corporate security. These were former academy contractors built like brick walls and armed with concealed tactical batons and tranquilizer rifles. My father Ryder wasn't taking any chances. He wanted me dragged back to Johns Hopkins like a sacrificial lamb. The lead operative, a scarred man with a broken nose, stepped forward. Clara Hastings, your father has ordered a mandatory medical evacuation. We can do this the easy way, or we can use the sedatives. Your call. You're trespassing on private property, I said, my voice eerily calm. I suggest you turn those SUVs around. The operative smirked, reaching for the tranquilizer rifle slung across his chest. Hard way it is. He never even managed to unclip the safety. The World Tree genome wasn't just a defensive, regenerative tool. It granted me absolute mastery over my own cellular output and biological efficiency. My muscle fibers had been interwoven with microscopic, hyperdense kinetic dampeners. Before his finger could twitch, I closed the 20-foot gap between us in a fraction of a second. The sudden burst of speed tore the grass up from the roots beneath my bare feet. I struck him in the solar plexus with an open palm. The impact sounded like a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. He folded instantly, gasping for air as his diaphragm paralyzed. The other 5 men shouted, scrambling for their weapons. I didn't give them the chance. I moved flawlessly my body, predicting their sluggish, unenhanced reactions. I shattered a kneecap with a precise low kick, deflected a baton strike, and drove my elbow into a 3rd man's jaw, instantly rendering him unconscious. My heart rate didn't even spike. I wasn't sweating. Every time a stray fist grazed me, the microscopic damage was instantly repaired by the verdant spore before the pain receptors could even fire an alert to my brain. Within 45 seconds, all 6 highly trained mercenaries were groaning on the gravel, completely incapacitated. I crouched beside the lead operative, who was coughing violently, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. I pulled his secure, encrypted phone from his tactical vest and pressed his thumb to the sensor to unlock it. I found my father's contact and hit dial. Ryder answered on the first ring. "Is she secured?" "Your dogs lack discipline." "Ryder," I said smoothly. Dead silence on the other end of the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "Clara, what did you do to my men?" "I'm sending them back to Greenwich in an Uber. The SUVs belong to me now," I replied. "And listen to me very carefully. If you ever send anyone to my home again, I won't just break their bones. I will dismantle Hastings Biotech piece by piece. Keep Izzy far away from me." I crushed the phone in my bare hand, the lithium battery sparking briefly as I tossed it into the bushes. The physical victory was sweet, but the real war was being fought on the stock market. Over the next 3 weeks, Aegis Therapeutics emerged from the shadows. Nolan Cross, operating as my brilliant, eccentric frontman, finalized the FDA fast-track approvals for our flagship product, the Genesis Serum. The clinical trials were published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and the medical world exploded. We had cured advanced stage necrosis. We had regenerated severed spinal cords in primate subjects. The European Union ordered 50 million doses for their public health sector. On a Tuesday morning, the opening bell rang at the New York Stock Exchange, and Aegis Therapeutics went public. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping espresso, watching the Bloomberg terminal I had installed in the living room. Within 4 hours, Aegis stock surged by 800%. But that wasn't the best part. The Genesis Serum directly targeted the exact market demographics that Hastings Biotech relied upon. Their oncology, trauma, and cellular therapy divisions were rendered completely obsolete in a single afternoon. By closing bell, Hastings Biotech's stock had plummeted by 42%. It was a financial bloodbath. Wall Street was abandoning my father's sinking ship to board my golden yacht. My burner phone buzzed. It was Nolan. "Clara," he said, his voice trembling with sheer exhilaration. "We did it. Goldman Sachs just upgraded us to a strong buy. But there's something else. I just got an urgent, highly confidential email from Ryder Hastings. He wants to meet the CEO of Aegis Therapeutics. He's begging for a buyout. He says his daughter is dying of a rare genetic decay, and he believes our serum is the only thing that can stabilize her." I smiled, a cold, predatory grin spreading across my face. The trap had snapped shut perfectly. "Set the meeting, Nolan Tro," I commanded softly. "Book the penthouse conference room at the Plaza Hotel for Friday. Tell him the CEO will be there in person. It's time to see my family." The penthouse conference room at the Plaza overlooked Central Park, bathed in the crisp golden light of late afternoon. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, wearing a tailored charcoal grey Tom Ford suit, my hair pulled back into a severe, sleek bun. I looked nothing like the timid, neglected twin they had banished to the Hamptons. At exactly 4 p.m., the heavy mahogany doors swung open. My father entered, first looking 10 years older. The stress of his collapsing empire had carved deep, haggard lines into his face. Behind him was Leo, looking nervous and sweaty in a cheap imitation Rolex. And then there was Izzy. My breath hitched, not out of pity, but out of sheer shock at the devastation the Aurelian genome had wrought. She was confined to a customized wheelchair, wrapped in thick cashmere blankets despite the heated room. The golden aura that used to radiate from her skin had turned into a sickening, jaundiced yellow. Dark, necrotic veins crawled up her neck, disappearing into her thinning, brittle hair. She was shaking violently, the parasite devouring her central nervous system, bite by bite. Nolan stood by the projector, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Hastings, thank you for coming. Mr. Cross, my father barked, though his voice lacked its usual booming authority. Let's skip the pleasantries. Where is your CEO? I am prepared to offer a 40% stake in Hastings Biotech in exchange for exclusive licensing of the Genesis serum and immediate unrecorded medical intervention for my daughter. I'm afraid Hastings Biotech stock isn't worth the paper it's printed on anymore, Ryder, I said, turning away from the window and stepping into the light. The reaction was instantaneous and magnificent. My father staggered back, knocking into a leather chair. The colour drained entirely from his face. Clara, what? What are you doing here? How did you get in? Leo's jaw dropped, his eyes darting between me and Nolan in frantic confusion. Izzy let out a raspy, agonizing wheeze, lifting her trembling, grey-veined hand to point at me. You. Hello, sister, I said, pulling out the plush leather chair at the head of the table and sitting down, crossing my legs. I must say, the golden bloodline doesn't suit you. You look terrible. You're the CEO, my father whispered, the horrifying realization finally breaking through his stubborn denial. The useless weed. It wasn't a dud. It was the world tree. Bingo, I said, tapping my manicured nails against the oak table. And while you spent the last year parading Izzy around like a show pony, ignoring the parasite eating her brain, I synthesized the ultimate biological cure. Aegis Therapeutics is mine. I own the patents. I own the serum, and, as of this morning, my aggressive short selling of your stock means I effectively own your company's debt. Clara, please. Leo suddenly burst out, stepping forward and dropping to his knees beside my chair. The pathetic desperation in his eyes made my stomach turn. I didn't want any of this. They forced me to go along with it. I always loved you. Clara, you have to believe me. Save her, so we can take over the company together. I looked down at the man who had strapped me to an operating table in my previous life. Without a word, I raised my foot and kicked him squarely in the chest. He tumbled backward, sprawling onto the plush carpet, gasping for breath. Keep your pathetic mouth shut, Leo, I sneered. You are nothing but a parasite, just like the one in Izzy's blood. Izzy began to sob, thick black tears leaking from her eyes as her internal organs continued to fail. Clara, please, it hurts. It hurts so much. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I took it from you. Please give me the cure. I'll give you everything. You already gave me everything when you took the Aurelian genome, I said, coldly leaning forward. But I'm not a monster. I can save you. The Genesis serum can stabilize the decay and strip the Aurelian parasite from your DNA entirely. You will live. My father let out a choked sob of relief. Thank God. Clara, name your price. Anything. I pulled a thick stack of legal documents from my briefcase and slid them across the table. Here are my terms, I stated, my voice echoing with finality. First, Ryder, you step down as CEO of Hastings Biotech immediately. You sign over your remaining shares to Aegis Therapeutics. Second, you transfer the deeds to the Greenwich estate, the London townhouse, and the corporate jets to my name. Third, Izzy, you will receive the serum. But the extraction process will completely neutralize your genetic compatibility. You will be stripped of the Vanguard inheritance. You will be ordinary, powerless, a mortal. You're taking everything, my father whispered, staring at the contracts with trembling hands. You're leaving us with nothing. I am leaving you with your lives, I corrected him sharply, my eyes flashing with the memory of the incinerator flames, which is far more mercy than you would have ever shown me. Izzy let out a guttural, desperate cry. "Sign it, Dad." "Sign it, I'm dying." With a defeated, broken sigh, Ryder Hastings pulled a Mont Blanc pen from his breast pocket. His hand shook violently as he signed his name on the dotted lines, surrendering his empire, his legacy, and his pride to the daughter he had discarded. I took the signed documents, checked the signatures, and handed them to Nolan. Then I reached into my pocket and tossed a single small glass vial containing a glowing green liquid onto the table. It rolled and came to a stop against Izzy's trembling fingertips. "Drink up, sister," I whispered, standing from the table and smoothing my suit. "Enjoy your long, painfully average life." I didn't look back as I walked out of the penthouse. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, sealing my family in the ruin of their own making. I stepped into the private elevator, pressing the button for the lobby. The descent was smooth, silent, and triumphant. I had rewritten my destiny, turning a useless weed into an empire and burning their golden crown to ashes. I was Clara Hastings, and I was finally free. What an absolute roller coaster! Clara didn't just survive. She completely dismantled the people who destroyed her in her past life, proving that true power isn't handed to you. It's cultivated in the shadows. If you loved this intense tale of rebirth, corporate sabotage, and ultimate revenge, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with your friends to see their reactions, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible twist-filled audio dramas. Stay tuned because the next story is going to be even wilder.